everybody. In this video, we're going to be talking about fractions and the definition of fractions, as well as some different ways that you can visualize fractions to help your students understand them better. So the definition of a fraction is that a fraction is a number that can be represented as a over b, where b does not equal 0. And when a is greater than b, the fraction is called an improper fraction. So, for example, if a was 1 and b was 3, that would be just a regular fraction. But if you had a was 7 and b was 3, that would be an example of an improper fraction. And later on, we'll talk about how improper fractions can be converted into mixed numbers, because the number 7/3 is actually equal to 2 and 1/3, because 6/3 makes 2 wholes. So that's the definition of a fraction. And one of the most common ways of thinking about fractions is to think about fractions as parts of a whole. So if you're thinking about fractions in this way, the denominator of the fraction tells you how many pieces the whole is split up into. And it's really important that when you split the whole up, that it's split up into equal pieces. So in this example, since the denominator was 5, that means that our whole circle is split up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And then the numerator tells you how many parts of the whole you're talking about. So in this case, since our numerator was 1, we have one of the pieces shaded because that's representing the part that we're talking about. So when fractions are first introduced to students, they're first introduced as unit fractions. So a unit fraction is a fraction that has a 1 in the numerator. And the reason why you start off introducing fractions with unit fractions is so that you can introduce the idea of splitting a whole up into parts. So you would say 1/4 is splitting a whole circle or a whole square or whatever type of shape you want to do. It's splitting it up into 4 equal parts, and then you are just looking at one of those parts. And then after your students are confident with doing unit fractions and they understand what 1/4 and 1/3 and 1/2 and all of those different unit fractions are, then you can move on to more complex fractions and show them that 3/4 is going to equal 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, because you have 3/4 all combined together. So that's the idea of decomposing fractions. And when you're working with fractions, there's several different models that you can use to help students understand and visualize what a fraction is. So one of the most common models is a region model, which basically means you take some type of shape and you cut it up into equal sized pieces, and then you shade the pieces that you're talking about. So both of these pictures here would be a visualization of the fraction 2/3, because both of these shapes are split up into 3 pieces and 2 of the pieces are shaded. Another model that's often used is a set model. So in a set model, the denominator of the fraction represents the total number of things in your set or in your group of things. And then the top number, or the numerator of the fraction, describes what types of things you're talking about. So for example, if we look at this set of marbles, there's a total of 48 marbles. And so that would be the number that goes in the denominator of the fraction. And then if we were trying to describe the fraction of the marbles that were yellow, we would say that 3 out of the 48 marbles are yellow. So 3/48 of the group of marbles are yellow. If we do the same thing with this other picture, we could say, well, there's 16 shapes in this picture. So that's going to be the denominator of our fraction. And then if I was trying to describe the number of triangles in this set of shapes, I would say 2/16 of the shapes are triangles. And that's how you can model fractions with sets. Another model that's commonly used is the fraction strips model. So you can actually buy these, or your school might provide them. But basically they're like little physical manipulatives where you have a rectangle that is called a whole, or 1 unit. And then there's other little pieces that are split up into fractions of that unit. So you'll have halves and thirds and fourths and fifths and sixths and eighths and so on. Or you can also just draw this out on a piece of paper or like on a PowerPoint or something like that. But the main idea is that you're going to have a whole unit, which is represented with a rectangle of consistent size, and then you split that up into equal sized pieces. So this fraction strips model that I have here would represent the fraction 5/8 because the whole rectangle is split up into 8 pieces and 5 of them are shaded. And fraction strips are very, very similar and related to the number line model. So the number line model basically says that we take the space between 0 and 1, because that's one whole unit, and we split it up into equal sized pieces. So in this case, it's been split up into eighths. And you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal sized spaces between the numbers 0 and 1. And the fractions 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, etc. can be represented by points on the number line. And the number line model is really useful, especially once you start working with improper fractions, because this number line keeps on going. And you could split the space between 1 and 2 up into equal sized spaces, and you would have 9/8 and 10/8 and 11/8 and so on and so forth. And so the number line model is really good for extending the idea of fractions into improper fractions. So all 4 of these models, the region model, set model, fraction strips, and number line model, are all using the idea of fractions as parts of a whole. But there's another way of thinking about fractions that gets introduced in about 6th grade. And this is the idea of fractions as division. And so with fractions as division, the way that you think about it is that the numerator of the fraction tells you how many things you're dividing, and the denominator of the fraction tells you how many groups you're dividing them up into. So you're kind of thinking about this as 4 divided by 5. And the way that you can visualize this when you show this to your students is you can say, okay, well, if I have 4 things, so let's say I have 4 circles. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to split it up among 5 people. Well, I don't have enough to give each person one whole circle because I only have 4, but I'm trying to split it up among 5 people. So one way you can think about it is you can say, okay, well, what if I just took each whole and split it up into 5 pieces? So I may not get these exactly equally sized because I'm just sketching it out. But you could say, okay, so if I was dividing this between 5 people, each person would get 1 piece. So person A would get this one, person B would get this, person C, person D, and person E. Then you would do the same thing with all of the other circles. So you'd split this next circle up into 5 pieces, and person A would get 1 piece, person B would get 2, or the second one, person C would get the third, person D and person E would each get 1. And if I do that for the rest of my circles, let's see what I get here. So when I split up all of the rest of my circles into 5 pieces and give each person 1 piece, notice that person A gets 1/5 from this circle, 1/5 from this one, 1/5 from this, and 1/5 from this. And so 4 divided by 5 literally equals 4/5. And so this is another way that you can think of fractions, and this usually gets introduced later on in about 6th grade. So that's our introduction to fractions. In our next few videos, we'll be talking about how to tell if fractions are equivalent or greater than or less than each other. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you have a good day.